What's up, Penn State fans? It is BWI Live for Wednesday, January 28th. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I am Greg Pickle. The final Wednesday of January is here, and that means the Big Ten schedule for the 2026 season is finally, long last, out. So Matt Campbell and co. now know who they will play during his first season in State College. T. Frank, between the YouTube comment section, the questions from subscribers over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and social media and just general life interactions, Penn State fans, and really Big Ten fans overall, have been waiting for this schedule to come out for the better part of a month and a half, I think. And the fact that it's finally here, I think, excites a lot of people, and I'm looking forward to talking about it at length with you today.
Yeah, this is the first year I've cared about schedules, just because it was late, and I am not a details person. But the anticipation built around when the schedule was going to be released and you know, the excitement for fans has got me caught up. Like I'm all in. Let's do it.
Yeah, and I certainly understand why Penn State fans were so eager to figure this out, because there's a part of the group obviously that is trying to schedule anything from buddies' road trips to a girls' weekend to weddings to bar mitzvah, whatever it might be, whatever special event you might have to hold in the fall or want to hold in the fall. And if you're a Penn State fan, you probably really want to plan it on the bye week. And at some point, the venues book up and you just have to make a decision. And so I understand why people are like, all right, it's the end of January, stuff's starting to fill up, let's get this show on the road, basically. And the Big Ten was in no rush to do that. Why? I don't know. I mean, I think on one hand, it made sense once Notre Dame USC decided that they were no longer going to continue that series for the time being, to give USC time to find another non-conference opponent. Well, they haven't yet. So they're still working their way through that process. So whether or not that was the reason for the delay, I don't know. But at the end of the day, we have a schedule. It's a little bit later than normal. And I'll be curious, and I don't know if the time will come prior to Big Ten Media Days, which were also announced yesterday. They're returning to Chicago for the unofficial kickoff to the season in late July of 2026. But I'll be curious to know if this is their plan moving forward, waiting until this time of the, before the next season, or if they intend now to be on more of an SEC announcement timeline, which is mid-December instead of late January.
Yeah, I still am. I'm trying not to be a conspiracy theorist, because I think generally it's not a good path to go down for all of us. But the longer it went, the more I kept thinking, like, are they adding more teams? Is this part of the conversation about how they want to do stuff where they're going to give them a little bit more of the runway to make these decisions and announcements late in the year? Or is this just a situation where it's a lack of what's the right word for this, Greg? It's a situation where there's this is not a priority for the administration, maybe a lack of organization, because schedules, I know in a lot of different areas and ways, like, they are built years in advance, or they are built a long time in advance. And so it feels like one of those things where you can work on this pretty early in the process. So why weren't you? To me, like, that was my biggest question. You're muted, by the way. But, like, that was my biggest question is, like, I know the NFL and we've had future schedules for the NCAA 3 or 4 years in advance, right? Right. So the teams were out. Why is the order of them playing so difficult when you've had, who's playing who? And so, like, this is not something you couldn't have been working on for months and months and months beforehand.
Yeah, that is the big question mark to me, and I don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately. I mean, I think obviously you could maybe point to the fact that the Big Ten may have been waiting to see how they already decided who was playing who. So I don't really see what difference it would have made if the Big Ten was going, or the college football playoff was going to 12 to 16. Of course, the Big Ten was involved in those conversations and knew exactly how they were going to play out. So yeah, I don't have a good answer for you.
Would the number of teams in the playoff have changed the dates of the playoff? Would that have changed the schedule where they would have had to change the start date or the end date?
Possibly, possibly. Right, yes. There's no doubt that that's a possibility.
Okay.
And so
those are at least reasonable factors then.
Right, until you realize that the SEC had their schedule out for a month, and then it makes you say, well, why did ACC and the Big Ten wait until this week? So I don't know. We will find out down the road. I guess it will be a question for another day if this is going to be the norm or not. But at any rate, T. Frank, we've probably gone long enough without getting into the Penn State football schedule for 2026. So let's do that now. I believe we have a graphic for that. We do. So Penn State obviously is going to open its season with a non-conference slate of games that includes Marshall and Buffalo at home on the 1st and 3rd weekend of September, respectively. They're going to go to Temple on September 12th, and then they will face Wisconsin for the Big Ten opener on September 26th. T. Frank, does it make most sense for us to stop at the end of each month, I think, and break these down month by month?
Yeah, and I think that Wisconsin game was kind of what I was expecting, a marquee name program to kick off the 2026 home schedule for Penn State. They do get to open at home on the final Saturday in September. That part, I think, is interesting and relevant to me because that's the real debut of Matt Campbell and his staff, right? That's the debut that they put together for Beaver Stadium's renovation updates and all those things on a national stage. I still think this has an opportunity to be a night game. Wisconsin, I don't know their schedule specifically, but I'm assuming they're going to come out of the non-conference undefeated as well. And so when you can put those two action figures on TV together and those two logos and those two mascots, India or Illinois in 2024, I'm bringing it up again, but that was to me what they're going to want to do to get as much, the TV networks, to squeeze as much out of the Penn State schedule as they can, which, as we mentioned, doesn't have an Oregon or an Ohio State on the roster.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that this is an interesting matchup for Penn State. And one thing I guess we should note before we go too much further is these future opponents were set in 2023 for this particular season and a couple future seasons. We'll get into that towards the end of the show, who Penn State faces in 27 and 28 Big Ten play at the moment. But someone had posted over on the message board this morning, and I know that some fans had commented on social media as well, that, this schedule's so easy. Penn State, or the Big Ten must have wanted Matt Campbell era to get off to a roaring start. And we'll talk about in a little bit in superlatives, and when we get into the big breaks that Penn State may or may not have got here, one of the breaks is that the way this schedule worked out in terms of who they landed on for this year is a lot of teams that did not have a tremendous amount of success in 2025. And does that matter as much today as it maybe would have 3 years ago with the way the transfer portal changes everything, a la Penn State as example number one?
Right.
Maybe or maybe not, but certainly the Big Ten wasn't sitting there and saying, okay, let's make sure Matt Campbell and co. gets all these teams that didn't make bowl games last year. No, these were set in 2023. So, yeah, I'm with you. Wisconsin is an interesting opener for Penn State at home. Obviously, the non-conference schedule is what it is with the trip to Temple. But this will be the third straight year, T. Frank, that Penn State opens at home in Big Ten play after a stretch from, I believe it was 2010 to 2023, where every Big Ten opener was on the road.
Yeah, James Franklin didn't live to see the fruits of his complaining. Well, Pat Kraft, at least Pat Kraft is still here as the guy probably making more of those waves behind the scenes. That I'm curious about how that transitions into the next month. So let's get to the next month and discuss October, right? So October typically for Penn State is the make or break month, and what do you see here? And read it out for our podcast listeners.
Yeah, no doubt. So Penn State's going to be at Northwestern on October 3rd. The question there, of course, is whether or not that will be at Northwestern's new stadium or not. We'll have to wait and see. They're going to announce that news next Tuesday, I believe it is. I would assume by then their new stadium will be open, but time will tell. October 10th, after going to Northwestern, Penn State hosts USC. Then they go to Michigan on October 17th. October 24th is this year's bye week, like we talked about earlier. If you have those special events to plan for the fall, October 23, 24, 25 is when you want to do it. And then on October 31st, Penn State closes out the month of October with a visit from Purdue. So interesting schedule here, T. Frank. I know some Penn State fans were a little bit, I think, frustrated by where the bye falls. But to me, it's a perfect spot for it. I really think it is. Would you probably prefer it where that Purdue game is? Probably. But only two Big Ten teams have a bye week, or three rather, have a bye later than Penn State. And, if you're on the same path I am, that having your bye as late as possible if you only have one, which I guess we should discuss that. So why some years there's two byes versus one? Just depends how the calendar falls. Yeah, so some years rather, there are 13 weeks between week one and conference championship weekend, and some years there are 14. And based on an 18-team league, that means some years you will need 2 byes to get there, and it means some years you only need 1. And this is a 1-bye year. So Penn State gets its own bye October 24th, but I think it works out well. I know Penn State fans probably wanted it before or after that Washington trip, but to me, T. Frank, at the end of the day, the goal should be to get it as late as possible, and Penn State accomplishes that.
I would actually say, and this did not help Penn State, but when we talk about getting a favorable schedule, I'm going to say this again. Last year, Penn State had a bye before Ohio State, and they had a bye before Oregon. They had 2 weeks to prepare for their 2 toughest challenges. Now, obviously, the part in October or in November didn't matter at that point for Penn State's playoff push, but they had every opportunity with a long non-conference followed by a bye to win that Oregon game. And this year, their bye comes after their toughest stretch. We'll get to this in a second, but if you're saying what's advantageous, I would say from a football perspective, I want to have that bye. From a health perspective and a recovery perspective, as late in the year as possible, absolutely makes a ton of sense. And I think that that's fair, saying that October 24th right in that right area. But, like, for planning purposes, you want to go to Michigan, I'd rather have a bye week than go to Michigan and have, like, time. I'm always, as a football-minded observer, I'm not a coach, but, like, I'm trying to think of, like, I'm trying to learn these teams, and, to me, like, that would be helpful to know, to have that bye before Michigan. Now, interestingly, Kyle Whittingham bringing his program over from Utah, Iowa State has a lot of familiarity with that, so they actually aren't facing Michigan for the first time in the sense that you would think, given the coaching turnover at Michigan. So, it's neither here nor there. It's a minor detail, but I don't want to relitigate 2025, but it was one of the biggest disappointments, I think, or one of the biggest missed opportunities about this year as well was, sure, the talent on the field matters most no matter what. But when you didn't maximize what was a gift on the schedule the way that they did, this year you just don't see that. And it's just it's the Big Ten meat grinder in October that we always talk about.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And it is worth noting that Michigan is coming off a bye before Penn State visits Ann Arbor in October. So we'll see if that makes a difference or not. A couple things. Good morning to everyone who is wishing us a good morning in the chat. We appreciate you being here. Beach Wine Guy says, while Penn State plays my alma mater, which is Marshall. Nice. I didn't know that. I would rather see at least one Power 4 non-conference opponent. Yeah, we can get into the non-conference discussion a little bit later in the show once we roll our way through the Big Ten teams that Penn State will face this year. I guess my lone thought there is I'm sort of stick in the mud, I guess you could say. I'm not sure that's the phrase I want to use, but this non-conference scheduling thing has just broken my brain a little bit. I don't know what you should do, shouldn't do, what's best, what's not. I am with fans that if you're paying for a season ticket package, you would like a better home non-conference slate, I think, than Marshall and Buffalo. But if you want the chance to buy potentially first-round college football playoff tickets and or quarterfinal tickets if Penn State would get a bye, you might not hate the fact that they're playing Marshall and Buffalo at home by the time December rolls around. Of course, we thought that last year with the non-conference schedule Penn State had. It didn't work out so well. So, yeah.
Win all your games that you can win, and that's the number one thing. Like, I don't know. Non-conference strength of schedule doesn't help you, especially when you play 9 conference games. And yeah, this is a softer schedule, but Caustic 31 already, you want to know, like, are we going to get mad if we give a prediction? Like, I think you're setting yourself up for a huge disappointment because we don't know what Penn State is. Like, I've been going through their offense and trying to understand, like, the tenets and what they're going to try and accomplish in the Big Ten. And, I don't know that we have full clarity on how this is all going to translate in year one. You're expecting Penn State to be better than all these teams because the logo this is a different team. This is not James Franklin's team. We don't know what this team is yet. And he says absolutely attainable with a lot of luck. Yeah, I get what you're saying, but Michigan is also, and I'm going to do this in reverse to you. Michigan is also a school that with their logo and their recruiting talent should be favored in that game. USC and their NIL and their program with a quarterback that, the stability, air quote, stability they've had. Like, there's 2 losses right there. I get it's going to be the whiteout home game, but, like, I don't think Penn State should be favored in all but 2 games. Right. West Coast team coming to the Big Ten, coming to Happy Valley, like, all the advantages. Like, yeah. And we've seen it not work out. And in a transition year as well. And I understand that nobody has patience for these things anymore. because there are coaches that have been exceptional, and there are quarterbacks that have been exceptional as freshmen. And so, I don't know, 8-4 is the floor. Sure, I think that's fair, but then I don't really have I think it's, from the Penn State side of things, way too early to tell what this team is going to be.
I think that's the case really across the conference. And look, I am to the point that Caustic 31 made. Like, I was angry that I didn't feel comfortable enough, he said, about, will you guys freak out like Nate if we give a record prediction? I mean, I wanted to do one last night. Like, that is my tendency to want to do that. And I start looking at this schedule, and it's you don't know a lot about Penn State, but you don't know a lot about where these teams are in general. I mean, how do you pick the Michigan-Penn State game without taking a deep dive on what Kyle Whittingham has brought there and lost there and so on and so forth? I couldn't tell you. I can tell you Minnesota, according to the on-three transfer portal rankings. Sorry, T-Frank, I'll finish this thought and slide along. Sure. But Minnesota has 18 incoming transfers that are former 3-stars and 18 outgoing transfers that are former 3-stars. They lost 1 4-star, didn't gain 1, and they didn't lose or gain any 5-stars. When you throw that into the formula mix, what does that tell you about Penn State, Minnesota? I have absolutely no idea on January 28th. So I get the desire to want to try and figure out where the record could go and set a floor and set a ceiling. And I don't necessarily disagree. Looking at this on paper, that 8-4 would be the floor. I'm not sure I'm willing to say 12-0 is the ceiling. But at least on paper, you look at this schedule, and certainly I think as we look at it at the moment, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see 8 wins there without question.
Sure.
Without much thought either.
So this is, I guess, the thing is, like, what I think we're both saying is Minnesota's not a bad football program. They are not great, but we've seen them have years that are peak years, right? And is this a year where they've got a peak year program? We cover Penn State football, and like sitting here on this seat, like I feel an obligation to speak with some level of intelligence about what the other teams can do. That's kind of my role. I am not in that part of the process yet, and that's when Nate says that, or when I say that, that's our pushback of like, we have no idea what these teams actually are because they change so much in the transfer portal. So if you say like you should beat Minnesota, you're going off the historical perspective, which is hard to gauge now because you don't necessarily, there are some teams that are going to stay where they are, right? But Penn State right now is in that middle. They're in the chunky middle, fluid middle, chunky fluids maybe, where it can change quite a bit. And we saw Penn State go 6-6 last year out of the blue. So, like, is it guaranteed that Penn State's a 10-win program because they are institutionally a 10-win program? Like, no, we saw the counterfactual to that last year. And so that's where I'm going to be doing deep dives into USC. What was their transfer portal like? What's their, what are they trying to do, in Minnesota? Wisconsin, said they were going to invest more in football, right? They were going to go more heavy into these things. I haven't checked in on Minnesota or Wisconsin whatsoever. I assume that they're a dumpster fire because they've been a dumpster fire and it's hard to turn things around that quickly. But like you can in 1 year. I don't know. I know I get the impulse to want to just go win loss. And we could do you want to do that, Greg? Do you want to give our predictions here? We can do that. I just don't know. Like for me, I'm going to be talking right out of my butt about this.
At this moment in time, it's hard to. It's actually virtually impossible to do it. I would say so I went back and looked just out of curiosity, and Bill Connolly's first SP Plus rankings came out last year at the end of February, actually a month from today, if you would use the same timeline, as the year ago. And so once you can see those, not perfect, obviously, at this point of the process, but at least a jumping off point to give you an idea of where at least one data system has these teams ranked after the portal. John said, go ahead. Yep.
Before we get to that, we should, especially for the podcast audience, we should get to the final month of the schedule where we got to the first 2. So here at the end, November 7th, November opens after the first, that'll be the second week of the CFP rankings at Washington. Huge game for Penn State versus Minnesota. Then they end, as usual, with Rutgers in Maryland. Versus Rutgers for Senior Day, November 21st, and then at Maryland, November 28th for the Thanksgiving game. So the Thanksgiving game on the road, I think, Greg, as somebody who has to travel to the games, is that better or worse for you? Because I think from having the home game November 21st, there's more a chance students stick around for that one as opposed to after the Thanksgiving holiday when everyone's definitely at home.
I think that is good news for Penn State. I think that if Penn State is, you're going to always lose some fans to that weekend, especially the student section of that weekend, right? I don't think there's any question. But if this Penn State team takes advantage of what this schedule looks like and has a chance to be in contention for the playoff, heck yeah, you're going to get more students to stay for the Saturday game on November 21st than you are getting them back to campus early following Thanksgiving on November 28th. So I do think this is a good setup for Penn State from that perspective. Again, if Penn State would be going into that game at, what would they be? 7-4, something like that. Maybe even an 8-3, but they're outside of playoff contention at that point, or look to be anyway. Maybe not as many kids stick around to fill the student section. But I do think that if you are Pat Kraft and you are Penn State, you do prefer that a game around Thanksgiving falls the way it did this year, with home first, away second. Because certainly it's just hard for a lot of reasons, and most of them are good reasons, to get kids to come back to campus early after Thanksgiving break. But you can certainly get them to stay one extra day in a lot of cases. Those with flights that plan to leave earlier, it kind of is what it is. But for everybody else, the ones that are driving distance that can wait an extra day, I think it really helps in that regard without question.
So I want to address a couple things here in the chat. Misanthropist Jesus says Marshall Temple Buffalo is a pathetic non-conference schedule. Sure. Brad wants them. I think he wants Penn State to play Pitt. He says Narduzzi says he wants Penn State to play Penn State yearly because it brings his program money, but Franklin wasn't down with it probably because of recruiting if he lost. Here is how it works. In 2016, Penn State played Pitt on the non-conference schedule. They lost that game. Then they went on a tear and went 10-2. And they did not make the college football playoff because they played Pitt. So, in an effort to never have that happen ever, ever, ever again, James Franklin scheduled in 2026 Marshall, Temple, and Buffalo. These things are absolutely related. And I'm sorry for the Sally Sensitives out there that I bring up James Franklin, because I know that it's going to cause a lot of people to call me a simp or whatever. But this is history. We're not going to recast history outside of the facts. Those are the facts that happened, and that was something that came up multiple times when talking about the schedule. There was no benefit to scheduling a Power 4 team, especially a top Power 4 team, and by top I mean a Division I team versus a Power 4 team. Everyone wants to see the fun game, but the point for the team is to make the playoff. And I know it's a more relaxed thing with 12 teams. We may see more of those games on the schedule, but when it comes down to who's the 10th team and who's the 14th team in a 12-team playoff, those are the decisions that are going to matter, and they are going to consistently side with, did you win more games? Because Miami made the playoff because they won more games.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to remember that regardless of what happened with the 2025 Penn State team, who was killed in the media, and rightly so, and by fans of opposing teams, and actually Penn State fans themselves, about that non-conference schedule, if Penn State would not have lost to UCLA and Northwestern and were a two-loss Big Ten team with setbacks against Indiana and Oregon, maybe if they pull out one of the, if they pull, long story short, if they're a two-loss team, they're in the conversation, even with that weak non-conference schedule. And whether or not they would have made it, we'll never know. But certainly you make a good point there about why the schedule is the way it is. And we'll see. People
if they had beaten Oregon, let's just say they beat Oregon, they lose to Ohio State the way they lost to them, it's a blowout in the second half, and then they play Notre Dame super tight down the schedule. Indiana super tight as they did, and they lose. So the only game we're changing is they win the overtime game against Oregon. They're in the playoff because they have faced 3 of the top 10 teams. Right. They beat one of them, and then they lost super close to another. So they're not going to be in the Big Ten championship game, but they probably are going to be in the playoff because their strength of schedule in the conference is harder than other conferences. Like the Big 12, this is the whole point of the Big 12. You get to your conference championship game or you don't get in the playoff because it is the collection of the remnant teams that the ACC, the Big Ten, and the SEC did not want. And the ACC is the weakest of the three actual Power 3 conferences. So this year, it doesn't look like that for Penn State. Like, they have an opportunity to have the bump and the bonus of having the Big Ten logo next to their name without having all of those top teams that we perceive right now on their schedule. But I still think in this kind of dynamic, changing environment, USC, Michigan, and Washington can be three teams that make the college football playoff. Like, they are also in consideration for that every single year. And Penn State has to be better than those three teams. So we'll see. Like, that's where we'll see this year.
Yeah, and again, I think you can helmet scout all you want, and we'll do that throughout the offseason. There's no doubt about it. But games that look tricky now may not look so tricky by the time we learn more about these teams during preseason camp. Conversely, games that don't look tricky now might end up being a little bit more of an issue than you expect. And I think Penn State, teams that are looking at, or fans of teams that are looking at Penn State could find themselves in a similar position right now. You might be a Michigan fan or a USC fan or whatever school it may be on this schedule and say to yourself, they got 50 new guys, all new coordinators, brand new head coach, new starters, lost a ton of NFL draft talent, including a first-round offensive lineman. What are they going to be this year? And you might find yourself saying, that's not going to be the Penn State we've come to know over the last decade. They're going to be a little bit worse than that. Or you might say to yourself, that game's a problem based on where it is on the schedule. And by preseason camp, you might have a totally different view of Penn State, as might we. So time will tell. But I'm just glad, T. Frank, that at this point we know where and when Penn State is going to play. And I guess it's probably a good time. Is it a good time to get into some superlative picks?
I think that's a good idea. Let's get into the superlatives. We've got some thoughts in the chat as well. So let's go.
Start there.
Let's start with the hardest stretch. You put the same thing as John Walk. And by the way, John, friend of the show, 3-game stretch of Northwestern. USC, Michigan is tough. Also concerned later about Washington and then Minnesota. But that's what you had for the hardest stretch of the season as well, right? That 3-game stretch. So why? What was that? You wrote about this yesterday, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I'll just pick this up here as a quick transition. Subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Like the video, subscribe it, give it a high five, give it a handshake, pat on the butt, whatever you want to do. And then, of course, go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, subscribe for just $1 to get a week of access to the site. And you can go check out Greg's prolific amount of work and written words over on the site as well. But what did you write about this 3-game stretch? Northwestern, USC, and Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that when you look at this slate of games, rather, you're coming out of September with the opener against Wisconsin, and, you would assume the 3 non-conference games are more tune-up in variety than they are, hard-fought victories, but you are going on the road for at least one of them, so time will tell there. But, you get into this game. I have no idea what Northwestern's going to be this year, and I would assume probably not very good. But, you still have to go on the road. It'll be the second time on the road for Matt Campbell and co, so at least they'll have a previous road trip experience. But, the stretch is picked not because of Northwestern, of course, but because of USC and Michigan. And if you have USC as your whiteout game, all the emotion and everything that comes with that contest, and then you got to quickly win or lose, put it behind you, especially if you're playing that game in prime time. You get done late Saturday night or very early Sunday morning, and you got to fast forward to go play Michigan, which could be anything in the first year of the Kyle Whittingham era. So, I think that when that stretch comes, we're going to know a lot more about this Penn State team than we do now. But certainly, at least on paper at the moment, it's the one that jumps out as potentially causing a trip up for Penn State based on where things are now.
This is again the problem with not seeing some of these teams on the schedule for a while. But one of the things I think that you can point out in this game is Bryce Underwood is a mobile quarterback. I think who's the quarterback at USC this year? Is it the same guy that was last year?
Yeah.
Or did he graduate? Yeah. So that's also 2 mobile quarterbacks back to back, and I don't know what that means, but they did not have as many of those guys on the schedule this past year, and they still had an issue with it. Does the new defense solve for that? I just generally, when you're facing quarterback talent, they had a rough stretch of it last year. 3 off the top of my head, 3 really good quarterbacks. 1, who would have thought last year? So just going back to a bit of a T. Frank's tangent here. We're talking about helmet scouting. Last year, before the season, Who would have thought Rutgers would be really good at throwing the ball and be terrible on defense? Who would have thought that those were the things that were going to happen outside the people that cover Rutgers? Like that we're like, oh, we weren't super sure about this. If you just thought of Rutgers, you think of like stingy defense for what they are, for their level of competition, and then putrid offense, like uncreative, just trying to shorten the game and make as few mistakes as possible. And suddenly Kirk Shiraka and Ethan Kaliak-Manis are slinging it all over the yard and putting up 28 points in the first half on Iowa early in the year. Now, they didn't win that game, and they weren't good enough to win a lot of games, but then they pushed Penn State, like the resurgent Penn State team at the end of the year, pushed them to the brink before they finally get a win. I did not see that coming from Rutgers. Last year I called them spicy Rutgers. So with these teams like Bryce Underwood, does he take a step as a passer in his second year where it's better than almost 50-50 touchdowns to interceptions in his passing? They'll take more off his plate, and they're going to accentuate his running in Kyle Whittingham's system. I can tell you that for certain.
Yeah.
And last year he had 487 yards rushing. I think you're going to see more of that from him in the coming years. So like that is going to be a tough stretch because of like those matchups and the specific matchups of those games back to back. I think that's also like who the quarterback matchups in all this matter as well.
Yes, that's 100% the case. Sorry, I'm in a little bit of my own tangent ranting over on the message board while you were ranting on the YouTube channel about the whole Bill Belichick not being a first ballot NFL Hall of Fame
That's
selection.
who I was thinking it was.
Yes. Anyway, we don't need to get into that conversation now. All right, next up on our list of Penn State schedule superlatives for the 2026 season is the trickiest road game. T. Frank, I'll let you pick first here because this seems to always work out where I pick the most obvious one. So go ahead, buddy. Have at it, and I will filibuster away from there.
No, I'm going to go with the Washington game. I'm going to go late in the year, like November 7th. You're going to Washington. The weather and the distance of that road trip, I think that's all fair to say. That's, to me, tricky isn't just like the matchup. It's also
right.
Institutionally, this program has not gone to the Pacific Northwest, which is the farthest place to travel in the contiguous United States for most people in America. So, like, it is not a easy trip for a Northeast team to go to the Pacific Northwest. So I'm going to put that one for the scheduling. And then again, they've got a dynamic quarterback who's going to be, I think, a senior this year, or redshirt junior. So it's going to be a dynamic matchup on the road that at a place that former Pac-12 teams are like, you don't understand how hard it is to play in Washington. And so, I think that, to me, that is the one that I'll say is the trickiest.
Yeah, and keep in mind, when Penn State is supposed to go to Washington in early November, I was looking at the weather almanac, as I tend to do on late January evenings, and it is the rainiest month of the year in Seattle, T. Frank. It's November by a wide margin. And
that's like 40-degree rain. That's the thing.
Right. So that could be an interesting subplot to that. And we can't even figure out if it's going to snow this weekend, though. So we'll worry about whether it's going to rain in November in Seattle down the road. But, that is going to be a tricky trip for Penn State. I'll be interested to see how Matt Campbell handles that trip, if at all different, similar to how other Big Ten schools have handled West Coast travel. With his experience in the Central Time Zone, I just wonder if that changes anything about how he will approach going to the Pacific Northwest at Penn State. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
It would be easier if you're traveling from the middle of the country than it would be kind of a disadvantage traveling from here.
Yeah, and I don't know if it'll necessarily change how or when they travel. I'm just curious if anything he's learned with that advantage can apply to Penn State in the Eastern Time Zone. I don't know if there is, quite frankly. But over the last decade, it's not something we had to think about.
Maybe they'll travel. They'll hang out in Ames for the week of the game, so it's an hour less on the body. They'll just do a full road trip.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how all that plays out. That would be fun. I don't know where they would go in Ames to do all that they need to do, but you never know. All right. For me, it was Michigan. And, look, I think when you look at the schedule, there were really only two picks here for this particular category. One was a trip to Washington, and then obviously the Michigan game coming off of what could be a whiteout. Either way, coming off of USC, who is going to be a top 15 or 20 team in the country, if not more, this season. So I just think that That is a tricky spot for Penn State. But going to Ann Arbor is always a tricky spot. Penn State's not won there since, I believe, 2003. That might be. No, that's a little, I think it's more recently than that. But it's been a while. I'm sorry. 2003 was the last time Minnesota won at Penn State. That's the one I had in my mind. But anyway, it's been a while. Penn State's up and down success at Michigan, obviously. So never a sure thing, never a guarantee. And when you're coming off of a tough USC game, it's probably not the opponent. You'd rather, I think, see Purdue in that spot, even if you were going to West Lafayette over Michigan.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the biggest bummer for fans of this schedule. And let's just skip ahead then to that Purdue game of the probable homecoming game is Halloween weekend. That feels a little late. I'm all about, so there's two things I'm looking at, like the X's and O's, and then what are the vibes of the home games? Right. And like gauging these things off of that. So Halloween weekend could be rainy, could be snowy, could be great. We've had 70-degree Halloweens. We've had snow on Halloween. So I guess, like, do you think that's your pick for homecoming, right? You've been talking about that for a while.
It just makes the most sense to me looking at this schedule. I mean, I don't think you want to do it against Minnesota on November 14th. Certainly not doing it senior day on November 28th. Could you do it against USC on October 10th? Yes, but that's the most likely whiteout date. You're not going to, I guess they have in the past mixed the whiteout game with homecoming, but not frequently. And then Wisconsin. I mean, I could see that being a possibility too for the homecoming game in September. But to me, that Purdue game just seems to make all the sense in the world. If I guess my second pick would be Wisconsin at the end of September. But first they got to get the whiteout stuff figured out and go from there. So, I look at the schedule, and it's just a game that makes the most sense to me.
The only other one, and I keep coming back to this one because I think they're going to win the game, and it's a early season game, is that the Wisconsin one. It's too early because it's in September, but we've had October 5th homecoming games before. So I don't want to belabor this point because, like, I think you're right, but I keep coming back to that Wisconsin game because it's going to have the best vibes. It should be nice weather, and it should be like feel like a big game, and then they can win, and everyone will feel good early in the Matt Campbell era. So why not make that homecoming as well? Yeah,
no, I totally agree, T. Frank. I think that there is absolutely a chance that could end up being homecoming for Penn State. And, again, as you flash the schedule back up there for those watching on YouTube, I'll just run it real quick. Of the home dates Penn State has, it's September 5th, Marshall, September 19th, Buffalo, September 26th, Wisconsin. In October, Penn State is home on the 10th against USC and the 31st against Purdue. And then it is home with Minnesota on November 14th and Rutgers on November 21st. So, I mean, you look at that schedule, and really, if it's not Wisconsin, it almost by default would have to be Purdue, I think. So,
yeah.
I mean, you're not going to do it in November, I don't think. Certainly that would be a departure from the norm. So I think that those are your two most likely options.
You know what I was thinking, too, about this schedule? It's very balanced. So we've had months where Penn State isn't home. Last year, Penn State wasn't home for the month of October, essentially.
Right.
Because they were home for the first 6 weeks of the season. You got home, away, home, away, home, away, home, home, away, home, away, bye. So, like, that's a very balanced schedule of being on the road and being at home. And I think that will feel good because it won't feel like you're away from the program. Like, if you're a fan, you want to go to the games. It won't feel like you take a month off of having tickets. And also won't feel like the majority of your season was Villanova, right? Because, that was kind of the main part of the season for the regular season.
Yeah, because by the time Penn State returned home, it didn't really matter to some degree.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm right there with you on that. All right, well, we talked about it a little bit, T. Frank. Let's get into this whiteout conversation. So, I think when you look at the list of opponents who Penn State was going to host this year, and again, this list was put together back in 2023, you looked at it and said, okay, between the fact they're a West Coast team and the fact they should be pretty good, you could have thought this back in 23. USC is the most, I believe it was 23 these came out. Like, USC is a logical opponent for Penn State to face in its annual whiteout game. You would think that Fox would not make USC play a 9 a.m. body clock game on big noon kickoff. But when you look at the schedule, I will say this, T. Frank, in my mind, I don't know if you got to check it out this morning. I ranked the contenders for Penn State's whiteout spot 7-1. And obviously, you throw the non-conference games out, right? You throw the Rutgers game out because that's senior day. There's one instance of Penn State mixing senior day with the whiteout. It was James Franklin's second season, 2015, Michigan. Penn State lost the game, but did have a whiteout during senior day. So I throw that one out. You throw Purdue out, or at least I do, because I think it's going to be homecoming. So that only leaves so many possibilities left, right? We just ran through the schedule. One question I have about USC and Penn State being a primetime whiteout game, because, right, it's been pretty clear. I can't imagine Matt Campbell is going to deviate from Pat Kraft's desires in his first season at Penn State. Maybe a couple years down the road he might change his mind. But pretty clear that they want it to be the best opponent on the schedule, and they want it to be in primetime. And primetime trumps all. So one interesting note about this USC Penn State game on October 10th is that, number one, the Big Ten, the big noon options are not very good. Maryland at Ohio State, Indiana at Nebraska, Michigan at Minnesota. Here's the other problem.
That's
UCLA
the biggest problem
plays
right there.
UCLA plays at Oregon on October 10th. So that game could be, it's not going to be big noon kickoff, but someone's going to want Oregon in their TV slot. Someone's going to obviously want Penn State USC in their TV slot. But it'll just be interesting to see how this all plays out, because the TV networks will obviously take opinions and advice and desires from the Big Ten and from the Big Ten member schools, but they decide how this works at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So as I wrote in my story, I would be shocked if this is not the whiteout game, and then if it's not in prime time, it will just blow me away. But
the other
you
thing
gotta
is
realize
they
some
go
of the other
through
factors too. Yeah,
they also go through not a lottery process, but they go through a snake draft, right? So it's about the games throughout the season. I was under the impression as well. So like if NBC, so Fox is going to want to have all of the biggest games that they want every single year, Michigan, Ohio State, etc. And so where is this game in the priority ranked non-linearly, right? So where is USC Penn State on the grand scheme of the best matchup of the season? I don't know. I haven't looked at the rest of the schedule, but like that would be another thing. As far as the way I understand that they go, and then of course they can trade and swap trading cards, and I don't know how all of it works. Ryan has a good idea and you have a good idea, and then I have like half heard all of that stuff, but I think that's also a factor in where it lands. But it's got to be the home. It's got to be the whiteout game. It's got to be at night. That makes the most sense.
It does. For a number of reasons, it makes the most sense. But I just felt like it was worth at least pointing out those potential roadblocks for that, between the lack of a big noon thriller, so to speak. And again, Oregon is obviously going to be one of the top teams in the country, and NBC could very well want them in prime time against UCLA. Will they take Penn State USC regardless? I would assume it would make the most sense to me. Peacock's always floating out there for one of these games to end up on. There's been a Penn State whiteout game before on Peacock, Washington, of course. So we'll see how that all plays out, but time will tell. All right, next up on our list is, I lost the rundown because that's what
best
I do.
non-USC home game.
Yes. So this was an interesting. I don't know. Did you? Yeah. So you went with Wisconsin here, and again, this is kind of a tough one, right? Because you throw like Marshall and Buffalo out immediately. You can't pick Purdue here, and if Purdue ends up being better than expected down the road, I will, eat my hat on air, but I doubt it. And I like this hat, so I hope that doesn't happen. But you went with Wisconsin. Easy for me to say. Why?
Because you took Minnesota, and but at this point, honestly, I've beaten this one to death, and so like I don't want to take Wisconsin anymore because I've talked about it too much. Minnesota is the answer. Like let's just both say Minnesota here, because it's going to be one of the more interesting teams from the, again, middle of the pack Big Ten. We don't know what they're going to be each year, but we know they're going to have a certain floor of competitiveness. They got two of the defensive tackles Penn State was interested in the transfer portal to sign with them after one of them visited Penn State. So like that's as far as I know about the transfer portal class. I was trying to look it up while we're here live on air, but like it's too hard to like be interesting and learning at the same time. So Minnesota, just again, we're helmet scouting here, but that's going to be the team that doesn't suck from the Midwest that will be visiting them. That will be a reasonably competitive game. The only reason I was thinking Wisconsin, again, is what's best mean. I think Penn State fans want to feel good, and I do think they're gonna smack Wisconsin around because they're what is Wisconsin? Like, what are they program wide? What is their philosophy? What is their belief? And does that fit with any of the players they have on the roster yet? Because for the first 2 years, it absolutely did not. So, Luke Fickell, does he get it right in year 3? I doubt it.
Yeah, time will tell on that one, Frank, but certainly, we talked about this a little bit on the phone last night, but it seems like Luke Fickell is only back in Madison because he might cost a little bit too much to fire. But the Badgers had a decent transfer portal haul. I mean, it wasn't great, but it was notable at least. I think they're top 20 in On3's transfer portal ranking, so that's not nothing. But yeah, I think those are your 2 games, and that'll be that. Last one here, possible night games. This is a tough one. I mean, it's just number one, I'll never understand why they don't televise this draft in prime time. I realize it's not they don't sit in a room and draft like you think they might draft. It's not like your fantasy football draft, or they should. Yeah, no doubt about it. But it is protracted. It does take a while. There's not always a ton of action because they're picking weeks. They're not picking games. So I still think there'd be some way, I guess what blows my mind is for the many smart people who have found a way to monetize the absolute every nth of college athletics, and certainly media companies and rights holders for these television networks have done the best of anyone by and large. It's amazing they haven't found a way to profit off of this, because they would. I have no doubt in my mind they would. The draft of weeks for which networks get the first pick, which weeks of the games they want. So in terms of night games, I don't know. I mean, USC Penn State is an obvious one. Looking at the non-conference schedule, could Penn State have a primetime opener? I don't know. I kind of doubt it, but possibly. You never know what the Big Ten Network wants to do.
That's the other half of that.
Yeah, right. Is the NFL schedule out for next season yet, T. Frank? Do you know offhand? No. Okay. So you can't really make a note of whether, maybe the Big Ten Network would love to find a way with Fox to show that Penn State Temple game in prime time, but you can't have the Penn State Temple game at 7:30 and then turn around and have the Eagles at home at 1:00 on Sunday. If the Eagles are away, maybe you can somehow finagle that. So the night games, there'll be a couple for Penn State. Keep in mind, in some respects, night games have turned into what noon used to be. And so this season, depending on how it goes, could have Penn State in primetime more often than expected.
Yeah, what do you mean by they've turned into noon games? Like, it's just a default for a streamer?
To some extent. But, noon used to be where you threw your lesser games of the week, and then you put your biggest ones in primetime. And now Fox, obviously, with its Big Ten television contract, has flipped that on its head. And you end up seeing some not-so-great games in primetime that used to be noon games or 3:30 games. So you just never know how
what always gets me is the Big Ten Network game that is a primetime game, like what you're saying, is like that's the Big Ten Network or the streamer game where it's a primetime game, and it's like, this is the big game, and then you get like the C-level announcer group. Then I hate picking on announcers because it's one of the hardest jobs, and people don't realize how hard it is to talk extemporaneously about something that you're describing in real time, but at the same time, like, there are people who are good at it, and there are people who are not good at it, and you usually get the not good at it people when you're on those primetime games. So it's like, it feels like you're at a big-time event, like you're at Disney World, but really you're at a county fair, is how it ends up feeling.
Yes. All right, well, let's get into best bets. I think that's enough schedule talk, but let me see here. One thing I wanted to get to, Eggman, ask if we're doing any post-renovation segments on Beaver Stadium before and afters. I'll tell you this. I stopped over at Beaver Stadium on my way up to the wrestling match at Rec Hall last Friday. It was so cold that I really did an abbreviated version of what I intended to do photo-wise. I'm sorry, but I love you guys, but it was too cold to spend too much time out there, mostly because not a whole lot has changed. So there has been a lot of work done, but it's not the kind of work, at least at this point in time, that's visible to the that's visible to the naked eye. So what can you see? the temporary seating's gone. Like that's the obvious, far and away biggest change that is between the end of the season, regular season, and now. Otherwise, a lot of the work that's being done at this particular moment in time is internal. I don't want to say it's all guts because that's probably not true. But certainly a lot of what's being done at this moment in time is, is something where you're not going to necessarily notice it driving into the parking lot, or you might not even notice it if you go to the Beaver Stadium outdoor hockey game this weekend. So, but yeah, we will do what we can with that when it makes sense to visually, because obviously that's what we do here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. But right now, there's just not a whole lot to share with you. Z-Man asks, still no word on the Penn State Blue White game this year? No, there's not a word on that yet. I would guess soon. Like T-Frank, my guess, I could be totally wrong here, and this is also another thing you and I got to discuss off air, what we want to do with signing day coming up next week for Wednesday's show, but we'll discuss that later. My expectation is that Matt Campbell will talk with the media for the first time since his opening news conference of the year on Wednesday of next week, National Signing Day. That's pretty typical for coaches to talk after that day. And so I have a hard time believing they're going to send him up there if he does talk, which again is expected in my mind. I have a hard time believing they're going to send him up there and have him field questions about whether or not, like, when's the spring game, what's the plan, blah, blah, blah. Like, I feel like if anything, he would be talking about what the plan is, not sharing the plan. So I would like to think for those of you waiting for that blue-white game info, that you'll have that info within the next week. Not promising you anything. It would make sense to me. But as we saw in 2025, T-Frank, not all things that look like they make sense always do.
Yeah, you got a better sense of this than me. We got a question here about streaming in the chance when you're not on the road, and I'm not on the travel team. So John wants to know, how do you watch the games, especially with streamers? I go with YouTube TV. That you get every game I need to, I believe. Luckily they have not sold to Amazon Prime yet, which is like just the worst. Like the NFL schedule of not being able to watch Thursday night games and crap like that is the worst. But like YouTube TV gets you, I think, everything you need. As long as you, I don't know, well, I just get the basic bundle. So that's so I found that to be the best is that particular package. But I haven't looked at the other ones to know if there's cheaper options. I just go with the one that I know and I work with.
Yeah, I'll be real honest with you. People ask this question a lot of us or of just college football fans in general, and it just seems to me like Rob makes a perfect point here. Like he has Hulu and ESPN Plus. Everyone just seems to like their own lane that they've found, and it works for them. So I would suggest, if nothing else, maybe check out a few free trials in the fall and see what works for you, what you like the most. And hopefully, hope for the best that your streaming choice does not have a disagreement with Fox or ESPN or CBS or NBC that keeps them off the air on your preferred platform. All right, should we do some best bets, T. Frank?
Let's do it.
It's Best Bets presented by BetMGM. Today and tomorrow, BetMGM players will receive an Any Sports Odds Boost token. To use the token, add a wager make up of bets from any sport to your bet slip and activate the token. If you win your wager that was made with the token, you will receive extra winnings and unrestricted bonus dollars. How do you sign up for BetMGM to take advantage of that? If you haven't signed up yet, use bonus code ON3 and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3, ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code ON3 when you sign up. So T-Frank, BetMGM has all kinds of fun and interesting odds out there, everything from novelty props for the Super Bowl to college hockey. I was hoping This segment could include a look at this weekend's Penn State and Michigan State top 5 ice hockey matchup, which is set for outdoors at Beaver Stadium at 1 p.m. on Saturday at the Big Ten on the Big Ten Network. Fortunately, that line not out yet, but one line that caught my eye, and only because I remember scrolling through a couple of like mid-year recaps, so to speak, of the college hockey season. And a lot of people were just clinging to this idea, not clinging to, but pointing out the fact that North Dakota had a freshman goalie and it had a top player who would be back later this year. And so they were expecting them to get hot, and they have gotten fairly hot at this point and can, play pretty well. So North Dakota to win the NCAA Hockey Frozen Four at 11-1 is one of this week's best bets. And again, would have loved to have done Penn State, Michigan State as the feature here, but unfortunately, no line out yet at BetMGM. I'm sure there will be. There usually is, but nothing out there just yet. Next one. Let's go to the Super Bowl, T. Frank. Curious what you think about this, and then you can share about Joe Brady and your thoughts on the Bills. Drake May over 37.5 rushing yards in the Super Bowl. Love the idea, hate the idea, or no opinion on the idea?
I don't hate it because I think that defense is going to be tough on them. I just don't know that Drake May against a zone defense is going to get 37 yards rushing. I can see him scrambling a lot. I just don't. The yardage there I think is tough because I can see him scrambling and I could see him getting tackled, short quite a bit. But yeah, let's go over. I would say just for fun, yeah, go over on that one.
Yeah, so this number opened at 34.5. It shot up quickly to 37.5, which is how Super Bowl props tend to work. I would note this: if you go to like a Super Bowl party and people are curious why this was the best bet on the Wednesday, January 28th edition, I'm with T. Frank. I do think he's going to be pressured out of the pocket quite a bit, and I just can't help but it's a lot of yards. Don't get me wrong, it's a lot of yards, but I think he is going to be moving forward quite a bit as he gets flushed from the pocket. It only takes a couple long runs to put me in position to possibly cash this bet. Last one. Yeah. I love the novelty props. I don't like paying minus 102 in juice for a 50-50 basically proposition, but that's okay. I am going with tails for the coin toss, T. Frank. Tails never fails. I remember asking Tyler Duzansky at one point during the season. I said, I have a question, and this has nothing to do with, they're asking him about all kinds of different things related to the season at that point and so on and so forth. And I said, how did you become the guy that gets to choose, heads or tails before the kickoff? And how do you choose which you pick? And he was basically like, I don't know why me, but they chose me, and I just go with whatever I'm feeling that day. So that was a interesting, I guess, conversation that didn't elicit as much information I had hoped. But to me, tails never fails. So I'm going to go with tails minus 102 for our last best bet of the week.
I have no analysis. You nailed it.
Nor should you. So that's best bets from BetMGM. We'll have more Super Bowl themed picks next week as we lead into the Super Bowl, as the Seahawks and Patriots get ready to play the final NFL game of the season. College football is behind us, but the 2026 season's out, so that's pretty exciting. T. Frank, got some BetMGM info to share with you all, and then we'll get you out of here on this Wednesday, January 28th edition of BWI Live.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
All right, T. Frank, that's about it for this week's edition of BWI Live, the final episode of Wednesday. The final Wednesday episode of January. I apologize.
There are no more Wednesdays.
No, there are never. There are certainly more Wednesdays to come. Pretty big one next week for the Penn State football program. We'll see how big it ends up being, but the traditional National Signing Day is now on the horizon. Final thoughts, buddy, as we wrap up here on this January 28th edition of BWI Live?
Yeah, so I was trying to have something prepared today to talk about the Penn State offense. I've been doing some deep dives into the personnel, the scheme, the ideas, and the concepts in the offense, and so I'm working through a lot of that. Been watching some film, trying to learn some more. Hopefully, I'll have that for you sometime this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But that's what I'm thinking about, trying to get more off-season deep dives to give Penn State fans a real good understanding of what they're going to see next year so that we can understand, like, hey, are they going to win or lose these games? injuries aside, like that's kind of giving fans an idea of like what the offense is going to be, so they don't just helmet scout, which we're better than that here on this YouTube channel.
Yes, we are, T. Frank, and we are better because all of you support us here. So don't forget to like and subscribe the video. Help us be better with the, as T. Frank calls it, the almighty algorithm. We'll have plenty of coverage of a lot of different things over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Throughout the rest of this week. Recruiting from fallout from last week's Junior Day continues, and there's another one coming up on the horizon. Sean Fitz, Ryan Snyder will join T. Frank for the Thursday BWI Live recruiting show tomorrow. We'll have any additional news about the roster, about the more analysis of the schedule, and of course, Penn State wrestling and basketball coverage, all coming to you later today and throughout the week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where it's just $1 to subscribe. So join us there, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. We're wrapping up another edition of BWI Live. Thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you next time.